Morning Connection. Welcome, welcome on this beautiful Tuesday morning. We are going to begin, as we do always, with our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we thank you for this new day in which we are filled with gratitude. We are grateful for another day to live out our lives in freedom, in happiness, and in joy. We give thanks to you for both the tangible and the intangible daily bread that you provide for us. We live and move and have our being in the perfect, unconditional love that lives in our hearts. We are grateful now for that which we have already received and are grateful in advance for more than we can ask or think coming into our lives on a daily basis. We commit ourselves today and every day this year to get happy and see what happens. In the name and nature of the Christ, amen, and so it is. All right, so we'll begin with our quotes. The first by Edgar Cayce. Meditation is listening to the divine within. Next, I trust my higher self. I listen with love to my inner voice. I release all blocks and surrender to the divine source within me. All is well in my world. Leslie McKeever. Next from Ernest Holmes, to the soul that knows its own divinity, all else must gravitate. The divine spark that you seek is already within you. Allow it to shine through you unobstructed, and it will eternally light your way. Omar Sharif, but I don't think that's the actor Omar Sharif. It's spelled differently. Okay, next, you won't find Christ in the church. You won't find Krishna in the temple. You won't find Jehovah in the synagogue. You won't find Allah in the mosque. The only place they reside is in humans. Lending a hand to a fellow human in misery is your highest service to the Lord. Abhijit Naskar. And from Dana Hutton, you are not on a path, you are the path. You are the path that divinity takes to awaken as itself. So I have one more quote, and I'm really mad at myself because it would have been the perfect ending to what I said on Sunday when I was up introducing the responsive reading, and I even took a screenshot of it and had it on my phone, and then I totally forgot to take my phone up to the pulpit with me. So you know that feeling you get when you think of the perfect comeback to something someone has said to you, but it's after they've walked away, or the conversation has ended, and it's so perfect, but it would really make you look like you were trying too hard to go chase them down or call them up and say da 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 da, and they would say, okay, whatever. So I, instead of putting this quote in later, I just created a whole teaching around it, so it wouldn't look like it was just an after the fact thing. So in order to set the scene appropriately, I'm going to repeat a little of what I said on Sunday and then end it with the quote, which is how it should have been done on Sunday. So it's a great quote, really. It's one of my brothers, and it was also, for those of you who saw it, one of the church's recent Instagram posts. So on Sunday, of course, we celebrated Easter, the resurrection of Jesus. And when I got up to do the responsive reading, I talked about the fact that one of the most important ideas that Jesus left with us was when he told us, these things I do, you will do, and greater. And so I said, boiled down to its simplest form, I believe that means that at every opportunity, Jesus chose love over fear, up to and including the fear of death. He chose to die willingly and conquered his fear of death, which we all have as humans. It's just natural, because he loved us. And his love for us was greater than his fear of death. He was a model for us in that he died physically and then rose again victoriously, conquering death itself. But one of the ways, in my opinion, that we will do greater things, those greater things he was talking about, is that we die symbolically while we are still alive. We die to things like our ego and to our belief in human limitations. we don't have to wait until we physically die and go into spirit form in order to know our divine power now. To me, that's what the greater death is that he was talking about that we would do, that we would experience. And I didn't say it exactly like that on Sunday, but that was the gist. So symbolically, what we die to is our old way of looking at ourselves. We die to the lie we were told that we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We die to the idea that we are wretches. We die to our sin consciousness and are resurrected into our Christ consciousness. This resurrection power that is even greater than Jesus's physical resurrection is us recognizing our I amness and being resurrected into our divinity while we are still alive in a physical body. My personal opinion. So then on Sunday, I went on to talk about something I'd heard a man named Andrew Martin say, but I won't repeat it now because that's actually going to be a part of the teaching later. But here's the quote that I was working up to by saying all of that, which again would have been perfect, but it's just as well that I didn't say it on Sunday because it gave me the inspiration for what I'm going to talk about today. So all's well that ends well, and as Esther Hicks says, everything is always working out for me. So here it is, and I've almost built it up way too much now. But no, it's great, and it's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So the quote is, "Today is your day to awaken to your divinity, to behold in the mirror the glory of God, to know the same Spirit who raised Christ from the dead is within you, to remember you are created in the image and likeness of God." So my title today is The Resurrection of Your I Am. And the reason that I worded it that way is because our divinity is not something we earn or that we can work for. It's not even something we're given. Our divinity is something we remember because it is who we have always been. Divinity is where we come from before we put on this physical body and before we clothed ourselves in humanity. Now, that's beautiful to think about and talk about, and it is 100% true. But we need to also understand that there is a practical side to it. And while we are here on earth, in this physical body, living in the realm of duality, all the while heading toward and growing toward oneness and unity, but still in the realm of duality, it's important for us to know that we're not going to feel like we're totally divine all the time, nor are we going to remember it all at once. It is a process, so we need to be patient with ourselves. I'm going to read in a moment some thoughts from a sermon of one of my cousins, Bishop General Swilly, and one of the first statements he made in this sermon was manifestation sometimes happens incrementally, which is true. There are many stories in the Bible as well as testimonies of people all throughout history since biblical times about instant healings and miracles that occur on the spot. One moment it's like this, and the very next moment it's like that. But there are also a lot of stories about what he calls, as I said, incremental manifestation. I'll give you an example from the Bible. There's a story in the 8th chapter of Mark about a blind man, and I'll quickly read it to you. When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then he spit on the man's eyes and placed his hands on him. "Can you see anything?" he asked. The man looked up and said, "I can see the people, but they look like trees walking around." Once again, Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes, and when he opened them, his sight was restored, and he could see everything clearly. Jesus sent him home and said, "Do not go back into the village." Okay, so several things here. My brother actually preached a whole sermon on this story once. First, this is a healing or a manifestation that is incremental. The first time Jesus lays his hands on him, there's improvement. He can see a little, but his vision is blurry. the people still look like trees walking around. So that's the first thing. The manifestation of something, in this case, the man's healing, or for our purposes today, we could relate it to our coming into the knowledge of our I amness, our divinity, sometimes is incremental. We have days where we're really feeling it and remembering who we are, and we have days where we're sitting under the juniper tree like Elijah. If you don't remember that reference, it's when Elijah had just had a showdown with the 400 prophets of Baal. He had called down fire from heaven when they were not able to, and he had also prophesied that it was going to rain after a very long drought, and it did. So all these things he had just done, he was really walking in and operating in his divinity. And then all of a sudden, because Queen Jezebel threatened him, one woman, after facing all these prophets and physical, natural disasters, he got scared and ran into the wilderness and ended up sitting under a juniper tree begging God to die, because he would rather die than face Jezebel's wrath. So incremental manifestation, once we have remembered who we are and know we are assured that we are divine, there will still be times when we'll waver, when we will doubt, and that's okay. That's human. That's just a part of humanity. My brother mentioned Sunday. Your doubt is okay with God. God is not afraid of your doubt. God will meet you in your doubt. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. Life, like everything in nature, is a spiral. It's not a linear process. We keep coming back around to the same place again and again, hopefully on a little higher level, which we'll talk also a little bit about later. So time out. Since I'm talking about life and the process of resurrection and coming into our I amness not being linear and straightforward, now might be a good time to mention that today's teaching is not linear either. Sometimes my teachings are very step 1, step 2, step 3, very neatly ordered, but today is not one of those days. So we're going to do a lot of bouncing around, but everything I say will have as its main theme us forgetting those things that are behind us in the past and remembering who we are at our core, which is divine. Okay, so quickly to wrap up this particular story that I'm talking about in Mark 8, the second thing to note is Jesus took the man out of the town before he laid his hands on him. And that's also an important part of the process. Sometimes you have to get out of your familiar surroundings and unlearn some things. Okay, you have to die to, as I was talking about before, some aspects of your life as you have always known it in order to be resurrected as a new creation. So third and lastly, after the man was healed, Jesus said, okay, don't go back into the village. The symbolism there is fairly obvious. Once you've been healed, restored, resurrected, don't go back. As I said Sunday, remember that you don't live there anymore in that lower consciousness. Okay, moving on. So speaking of this symbolic death we have to go through before we can be resurrected, I want to read a piece of writing by Amanda Ellis about the process of death and rebirth and how beautiful it can be. Sometimes when we look at ourselves in the mirror and take stock of all the things that have happened to us, everything we've been through, we feel like the damage that's been done is just too great to be repaired. We think we're too far gone. Other people might be able to experience rebirth or resurrection, but it's too late for us. The fire in our lives has just been too devastating. And so when she wrote this piece, it was back a few years ago when wildfires were raging all over the country of Australia. And so it also speaks to the incremental nature and the slow-moving process of life. So that's the context. So she writes, consider a single piece of coal glowing in your family's stove. That chunk of coal was once a green plant, a fern or a reed that lived perhaps 1 million years ago, or maybe 100 million. Can you imagine 100 million years ago? Every summer, For the whole life of that plant, its leaves caught what light they could and transformed the sun's energy into itself, into bark, twigs, and stems, because plants eat light in much the same way we eat food. But then the plant died and fell, probably into water somewhere, and decayed into peat. And the peat was folded inside the earth for years upon years, eons, in which something like a month or a decade or even your whole lifetime is just a puff of air, a snap of two fingers. And eventually the peat dried and became like stone, and someone dug it up, and the coal man brought it to your house, and maybe you yourself carried it to the stove. And now that sunlight that is 100 million years old heats your home tonight. So even when the plant that eventually becomes coal dies, we must remember that death is an illusion. Nothing ever truly dies. It just transforms. Everything recycles. Everything rejuvenates. The forest will come back, and as I said, she was referring to Australia, but you have to believe that. There is no reason to go into fear and to catastrophize and believe that whatever destruction or damage the fire causes will be complete. That's not the end of the story. So that's something else we need to remember in our process of resurrection. Jesus didn't die and immediately come back to life in 5 minutes. He was dead for 3 whole days. Sometimes if we look at someone's story or our own story on one of those days, it seems hopeless. But as Amanda put it here, the fire and the destruction that it causes, the death that the fire brings with it, is not the end of the story. So back to that statement, manifestation is incremental. So as I said, that little statement was the opening of a sermon by my cousin, Bishop Jim Earl Swilley, and the name of the sermon was Open the Eyes of My Heart. And so we're going to shift gears a little now, and I want to read to you a little more from that sermon about how we view things and how we create our own reality, which is definitely the result of recognizing and living in and according to our I am nature, or as I've been calling it, our I amness. So he goes into some quantum physics here, which we're all familiar with. I've talked about the principles of quantum physics with you many times. He says, in the micro world of atoms and particles that is governed by the strange rules of quantum mechanics, 2 different observers are entitled to their own facts. In other words, according to the best theories of the building blocks of nature itself, facts can actually be subjective. Multiple realities can and do coexist. Reality manifests, or realities, plural, manifest in the multiverse. The glass is simultaneously half full and half empty. It's not just a matter of perception. Both things are true. 2 opposing things can be true at the same time. Such as, the worst thing that ever happened to you can also, at the same time, be the best thing that ever happened to you. Multidimensional reality is an important part of ancient wisdom. All right, so time out. I want to talk about, for a second, 2 people with 2 different stories on 2 different paths with two different lessons to learn. My brother talked about this a little bit on Sunday, which is what brought it to my mind. He talked about the fact that after Jesus resurrected in the garden, Mary came to him. And so the first thing he said to her was, Mary, don't touch me. Because he knew the lesson Mary needed to learn was, I'm not in this physical 3-dimensional life anymore. Don't try to keep me here, because that's not who I am. I have transcended and become spirit. And because that's the lesson Mary needed to learn, that's how he approached her. Don't touch me, Mary. Now, very shortly after that, he went to see the disciples, and Thomas said, I don't believe it's you, Jesus. So what did he say to Thomas? Thomas, come touch me. Touch my hands. Touch my side. So that doesn't really make any sense in on one level that he would say to Mary, don't touch me. But to Thomas, just a few days later, he said, yes, come touch me. But it's because Mary and Thomas were on two different paths. They were in two different realities, and they needed to learn two different lessons. And Jesus knew that. So, according to what we need, according to what reality we are walking in, that's where Jesus, God's source, will meet us. He went on to say this, which I thought was beautiful. The tree of life, it's always a question of whether we're going to follow the tree of life or eat from the tree of life, or whether we're going to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life has infinitely more branches than does the limited binary choices offered by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as was evidenced by the example I just gave you. Each of us has our own unique resurrection story. Observers are powerful players in the quantum world, and this goes deeper than just the perception is reality piece. Perception is undoubtedly important, but the reality is that reality is reality. And Mary's reality was true for her, and Thomas's reality was true for him. Okay? According to a certain theory in quantum physics, particles can be in several different places or states at once. This theory is called superposition. Oddly, this is only the case when particles aren't observed. However, the second you observe a quantum system, it picks a specific location or state which breaks the superposition. The fact that nature behaves this way has been proven multiple times in the lab as the subatomic world is studied. So the lesson from this is, keep turning the dial until you find your right reality today. Everything is everything. So then he goes on, it's not about praying to a God outside yourself until this thing you don't like or this thing you don't want to be goes away, then everything will be okay. The higher thinking, or the I amness knowing, is that everything is always okay. And that doesn't mean that you are in denial of whatever it is that's negative. It just means that you know you have the ability to turn the diamond just a little until you get to the shiny part. Okay. Next, holistic thinking says that everything is happening to me all at once, and it's okay. It's just all life, and I learn how to prevail in it, and I'm constantly observing everything. Everything ultimately turns into a blessing for me, no matter how it shows up initially. The Lord will perfect that which concerns me. Everything that happens to you is supposed to pass through you. Everything you encounter is supposed to be processed by you, allowed to work for you in whatever way it can, the lesson of it integrated by you, and then let it go. All right. So thank you for that insight from Bishop Swilly. Now we're going to talk for a moment about that last statement I just made, because learning lessons and then integrating them in to what we are is one of the things that helps us move into our I amness. Okay? It helps us get back to the remembrance of our divine nature. So first I'm going to read from a piece by Carolyn Mace, where she's talking about the difference between our human selves, or what she calls our personality, and our creator self, who is what we are when we are operating in our I amness. And she makes the crucial point that we don't and can't really create anything from our personality self. We must shift into the higher nature of our I am self to create, because that's the part of us that's like God. She says, it takes wisdom to understand that it's not my personality that is creating my reality, but rather my inner spiritual nature. Because in order to create, it takes a much more sophisticated level of being from a much greater center of power than personality alone. It's our personal story or stories that create our personality, which is also the filter through which we see the world. But that's not the part of us we create from. We have to get beyond our personal story in order to reach the level of our higher higher self, our I am. Our personality is not the part of us that is creative by nature because it is not the godlike part of us. In order for us to get beyond our personality, we must drop the story or stories that it is built on. Our story or our history is only useful to us until we have learned whatever lesson it has come to teach us. But then we must integrate that lesson, hopefully, into our personality. Because if we do that, then little by little or incrementally, our personality, which is shaped by our stories, grows into our higher self. And everything that is not our divine nature is stripped away, giving our human personality the opportunity to merge with our Creator self, which is what happened to Jesus of Nazareth. He became the Christ as he allowed the lessons he learned on a human level to be integrated into the totality of who he was and to strip away everything that was not his original divine nature. Excellent. So now we're going to move on to Andrew Martin, but he's talking about the same concept. He says, if you've truly integrated the lessons from your past, you don't need to remember the story he's talking about, in order to remind yourself. Integration ensures that the lessons have become a part of you. In other words, once the story has done its job, it's okay to drop it and move on. Continuing to remember or to keep its member, the parts of the story, alive, does exactly that. It keeps it alive. In order to move past it, you have to integrate the lesson and then drop the story itself. Your history doesn't tell you who you are. Your history tells you who you have been. History can never define your timeless, eternal self. If remembering history worked, we wouldn't keep repeating the same old mistakes. If you are using history to create a model for your future, then you are only creating from the mind. And the best the mind can offer is a rerun. The minute we go into the mind, it becomes rooted in the past, in our story, because that's all the mind has access to. Also, believing you need to keep the bad stories alive in your consciousness in order to keep you safe is a trick of the mind. The true self, the expanded self, the eternal, infinite creator self, doesn't need history to do what it came here to do. Source is always seeking its expansion through new experience or living in the present, being in the now. History is the opposite of this. What is valuable is the wisdom we gain from the experiences in our history, but they've got to be integrated in order to do us any good. And when we allow this to happen, when we allow the wisdom from the lesson of our past, when it comes in, it elbows out the story of the past that was just a placeholder. And that's when real growth occurs. We no longer need to keep remembering the story once the end result, the product, has been fully integrated into our eternal self. Or, going back to another statement my cousin General said when he was talking about this, a new thought or word is just like a transplanted organ. It replaces the old organ with something brand new that works much better. So that makes sense, right? If you go into a hospital to have a kidney transplant or a heart transplant, what's the first thing they do? They take out the old one because there's no room for both the new and the old. And if you leave the old one in there alongside the healthy one, it would just start rotting and then infect the new. So this is the same concept. We can't remember who we are as a divine being while at the same time we're still remembering our old story or our old stories of all of the bad things that have ever happened to us. There's no room for both. It's one or the other. And if we keep on remembering those old stories and letting them stay in there, they're going to eventually start rotting away what is new. All right, so that's good stuff. Okay, so I want to wrap this up today with a different piece by Andrew Martin, and I've read this to you before, but it's a really good depiction of the difference between his life as human personality Andrew and his life after he let that Andrew die. He came face to face with his old stories and his old fears. He put them to death and was then able to be resurrected as new Andrew. And it was not an immediate or instant thing. It was a process. It was incremental manifestation. But eventually, he talks about, instead of being a thermometer, where he just was going into places, taking everybody else's temperature or the temperature of the environment around him, and then reacting to that, he became the thermostat. When he walked in, he set the temperature, okay, which was around him, which affected his environment and everybody around him. And that's a good way to describe the difference between when we are expressing as our human self and absorbing and then reacting to all the energy coming at us from everybody else, and when we are expressing as our divine resurrected self, setting the temperature everywhere we go. This is his story. He said, "For most of my life, when I walked into a room, I was immediately looking for where the danger was, the emotional risk. I was always gauging my experience by what was already present energetically via others. Now I feel like I'm at a point in my experience where I don't really pay attention to that. Now I'm walking into the room searching for resonance. I'm not interested in conflict. I'm not interested in paying attention to the energy or people who make me feel out of whack or off balance. And I don't mean I ignore weird energy or the people it's coming from, but rather I've finally reached a place where I now trust my own energy, and that's all I need to know about, because that's all I am in control of anyway. Before, I was always focusing on the places where I didn't fit in, because I had this subconscious belief that I needed to protect myself. And honestly, that was a legitimate feeling at the time, because as a gay kid growing up in a small town in Wyoming, I had to be careful about who I could trust. I couldn't open up to everyone. It wasn't necessarily a safe place for me, emotionally or physically. But I don't live there anymore." There's that key line that I was talking about Sunday. That's what happens when we remember where we came from. And I'm not in that emotional space anymore. And even though part of me still wants to respond as I did then through the lens of trauma, the work I've done on myself has allowed me to integrate who I am now and to realize the trauma and heal that part of myself. Now, standing in my light, I no longer require the external world to be a place that gives me what I need, because I create it for myself. In the beginning of my spiritual journey, when I was really learning how to open myself consciously and connect with Source, I was very nervous and anxious, because suddenly I was opening myself up to a lot of energy and feelings without numbing or avoiding them, as had become my habit. And so I was constantly shielding myself energetically and mentally putting myself inside bubbles of light. And I'm not saying protecting yourself like that, or however you choose to do it, is a bad thing. But I see it as a version of training wheels. Until I was ready to run and be responsible for my own energy, I needed that protection. I didn't know how to ride the bike without falling off or without the fear of falling off. But I am not in that place anymore. I don't consciously protect myself now. We live in a world of duality, but I think duality collapses once you embrace all of who you are, which is what we were talking about in quantum physics. As soon as you observe it and key in on one reality, you bring that to life. I don't function through that lens of duality anymore. I don't shield or protect myself. I just do my inner work. I no longer cower at the thought of low vibrations or negative energy. Instead, I cultivate my own inner light, the inherent gifts that are my sovereign birthright. Yes, I am aware that there are dark forces out there, but none of them, and I mean zero, have the power to overcome the radiance of one who is rooted in the truth of who and what they are. When I know who and what I am, and I live rooted in that, using the frequencies of love and truth as the raw materials to create my life, then everything else falls away. When I am confronted by a wonky energy of any kind, I merely turn my spotlight of love and compassion towards it, acting as a witness of the moment. I stand tall, shining my awareness like a beacon, and watch as the darkness begins to transform itself. When I live as the constant, eternal embodiment of the light that I am, I see fear as merely an opportunity to remember the truth. And that's what we've been talking about all day today, choosing to follow the love instead of the fear. It is the truth that emanates from my field that protects me, the field that I embody, that I am. In the presence of the divine that I am, nothing that is less than love can stand. So, I began today by saying that Jesus, at every opportunity, chose love over fear. And that's what we must do as well in order to be resurrected as our divine selves. Fully awake to our Christ consciousness, we've got to die to our old stories and integrate the lessons we learn from them through love and forgiveness. So to help us do that today, I'm going to read 2 affirmations. One is partially from Michael Beckwith, and the second one is from Louise Hay. So I'll pause between each line so you can repeat it after me if you'd like. Today, I embrace the memory of my past and feel grateful for all that life has given me. I acknowledge that I did the best I could at the time. But now, I am ready to let the past go. And in doing so, I clear the road ahead of me for miracles and happy surprises. I know the difference between love and fear, and I choose love. To anyone who has ever hurt me or caused me pain, I say, I forgive you and set you free. Your actions no longer have power over me. I acknowledge that you are doing the best you can, and I honor you in your process of unfoldment. And the final one, in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. Yet life is ever changing. There is no beginning and no end, only a constant cycling and recycling of substance and experiences. Life is never stuck, static, or stale. Each moment is new and ever fresh. I am one with the very power that created me. And this power has given me the power to create my own circumstances. I rejoice in the knowledge that I have the power of my own mind to use in any way that I choose. Every moment of life is a new beginning point. This moment is a new point of beginning for me and for all of us, right here and right now. All is well in my world. So, as my brother said last week, there's no Easter without Good Friday. There's no resurrection without a death first. So let's remember to be patient in the process of our resurrection, be patient with ourselves in the process of our dying to our old stories, because any death in any area of our lives is not the end of the story. Amen?
We did some work today. It's difficult work sometimes, but sitting with it, bearing witness to it, seeing it. Before I knew how to say bearing witness or embodying, I would just say to people, see it. You don't look away from it. And so we don't look away from our past. We know that if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. At the same time, here's the work. seeing the lessons from the past, but not embodying the pain in the present. That's difficult work because uh, this week, preparing for one of my classes this week, I had to watch 3 different documentaries on the Holocaust. It's difficult work. Thursday is Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is one of the holy days in Judaism. Yom HaShoah, I think is the way they say, and what that means is never forget. And going through the process of bearing witness, embodying that lesson, is very difficult. Even some of the people in my class said, I don't know why are we watching this? I don't want to see this. And the professor kept having to say, you need to sit with this. You need to see it. And it doesn't mean that we continually carry that pain every moment of our day, but unless we sit with it, see it, embody it, bear witness to it, watch this, unless the word takes on flesh, there will be a repeating of it, maybe not in that specific area, but in other areas. And so those of us who watch a Holocaust documentary may say, I would never oppress Jews. I would never oppress someone for their religion or their race. I've seen the pain of that, but I would never do it. Would you oppress someone for their country of origin? Would you oppress someone for their sexual identity? Would you oppress someone because of their gender? So there's a reason that we sit with it. There's a reason we need to feel it. Why? So we don't have to do it again. As Jesus looked at Judas and said, what you must do, do it. Let's do this. Why? So that we never, as Paul said, once and for all, we are going to be reconnected to God, whether it's out of this illusion of separation consciousness or reconnected to God through a Christian dogma of literal bloodshed. Whatever it is, let's see it, let's sit with it, let's feel it, embody it, and then the work is not to carry that pain body. We can be happy. This is the year to get happy and see what happens. We can happily bear witness. Where does the joy come from? Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for these lessons. Thank you for sharing this with us. It was painful, but now I'm awakening. I'm coming to a different knowledge, and so we did a lot. You did a lot of work today. I came in a few minutes late, and as I was walking in, I saw one of my favorite peoples in the whole world, the Reverend. The Reverend. We call each other privately irreverent. Reverend or irreverent. John Scott. Did John say anything? Would you like to come say? Are you sure? Okay, we always want you to, but we're glad that he's with us today. And he is a fellow sojourner in the waking up process. He and I share a special embodiment of waking up together, and that's a story between us. But there are other lights. There are other voices. There are, as we talked about, our late bishop's vision of seeing the kingdom of God like little lights all over the globe. We thought maybe at one time those were Christian embassies. Now we understand a little bit more. They're not Christian embassies. They are embassies and models for the oneness of all humanity, for the universal body of the Christ and Christ conscious mind, and those connected in that way, even if they call it something different. And so there's so many wonderful lights around us. We give thanks for that today, and thanks for wonderful teaching. I did want to give a few shouts out to some wonderful people joining us today, and those people are Pastor Don. I love it that Brandy put Dad first. You better put the founder of the ministry first. I love that. Pastor Don, Sheila, Laverne, Bobby, Pastor Gloria, Pastor Curtis, Callie, Emma, Sheila, Pastor Fred and Mary, Kisa, Alita, Doreen, Justina, hey Miss Justina, Luana, Reverend David Michael, Elaine, Annette, Megan, Apostle Wayne Clapp, and this is just a quick announcement. It's Curtis's actual birthday today. Happy birthday, Pastor Curtis. We love and appreciate you more than we could even express in words. And I wanted to say about Apostle Wayne Clapp, this Thursday night, I'm joining him for a Facebook Live session, and so that's from 7 to 8. If you'd like more information, we'll have some information here at the church about that. And so he's talking about the language of inclusion, how to do that, how do we become more inclusive. I think it'll be a wonderful conversation. I'll be with him from 7 to 8 this coming Thursday. Dr. Elijah, Cheryl, Richard, Carla, Mikhail, Sarah, Elizabeth, Sylvia, Garrett, we love you guys so much. We hope that today has been a blessing to you. We look forward to continuing our conversation tomorrow night. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And then next Sunday morning, we look forward to seeing everybody that would like to come out and be with us. Again, that is your personal agency. That is your choice to decide if this is right for you or not. I've got one vaccine shot, so I'm halfway vaccinated. I'm happy about that. I'm excited to get the second one, knowing that we are slowly, responsibly, safely getting back to some level of normalcy. But those who want to continue joining us online, we certainly want you to do that as well. We love you guys. Go in peace, and may God bless you.